What's up, everybody? This is going to be my first attempt at adventure theory. I want to apply literary theories to Adventure Time because I think that cartoons are definitely serious enough to do that. So we're going to start by looking at the first episode of my choice, which is Furniture and Meat from Season 6, Episode 8. So if you want to check that out before or after this presentation, I definitely recommend it. It's absolutely one of my favorites. So, let's take a look at what Marxism is. This analysis here is going to act as an allegory, since it explains the root cause of an issue rather than its symptoms. And it's an allegory because this episode doesn't exactly explain what's happening in capitalist systems, but it gives you a pretty good idea of the concept. And Marxism seeks to dissect the ideology of the time. And the ideology of the time has been the same for about 170 years, which is that free trade will produce wealth and liberty simultaneously. So if this is true, an increase in wealth should have a corresponding increase in liberty. Not even proportional, just, an increase. So for this project, we're going to focus on how the bourgeoisie control the proletariat. And during this presentation and this episode, pay attention to how the economic system exists beyond the control of an average individual citizen. So the story begins with our heroes, Finn and Jake, asleep atop their treehouse. While they're asleep, Bimo and Nepter hit the treasure room, causing all of their money to spill out. They have nowhere else to store it, and the only logical thing to do is go to Wildberry Kingdom. One thing to notice, they only briefly mention it, but the Wildberry Market has been remodeled. This remodeling seems to only happen to the downtown area, and as we'll see later, this is actually a form of gentrification, because they're pushing the poor people out and trying to introduce new money. So this journey from the country to the city is representative of the evolution we see from feudalism to capitalism. Because serfs would leave the country in order to go to the city so they could earn living wages. And this here isn't really a problem in the story, the gold bursting out. Marx wouldn't care that people can purchase luxury goods. You should probably be able to buy a nice car, nice clothes, a little bit extra because of the hard work you do. The problem is when you can use your money in such a way that you manipulate the values of the market. So, interacting with the market. Finn and Jake unload their massive supply of gold into the public fountain. A guard confronts them, saying no gold or people in the fountain. Jake innocently responds by saying he only wanted to spend all their gold, so he offers a few gold coins so the guard can help them out. It's pretty innocent, right? The guard declines, and he says it's a serious offense to both play in the fountain and to bribe a guard. Playing in the fountain is actually punishable by a lashing, which seems kind of intense. Pay attention to the second part here, where he says, and that doesn't even account for bribing a guard, because Jake sweetens the offer by throwing in the gold crown, and the guard says, now you're talking. So, bribing a guard here obviously has more value than playing in the fountain, and the bribe actually just turns into an economic transaction. The difference between a fine and a bribe is that a fine is used in order to punish people, and a bribe is used to bypass that fine. So, Jake bypasses the punishment for playing in the fountain by bribing the guard. And you really have to wonder right here. I mean, this guard does seem like kind of a jerk, but he did start off by wanting to uphold the rules of the kingdom. So what would you do right here? After the guard leaves, Uh, Finn asks some kids to take a bag of gold and buy furniture and meat for the fountain. It's become their new chill spot. Uh, they don't want to do this despite Finn saying they can keep the change because they're middle class, so they have to sweeten up the offer for them. The same guard rushes back and says that furniture and meat are against the rules of the fountain. We have to make sure these laws are respected. Jake offers him a diamond and a golden chalice, but the guard says they can't buy him off twice. That's interesting because when Jake adds in the extra bag of gold, the guard admits he may have been wrong. So this is an evolution of the process of purchasing this guard. The price increases obviously, but it's pocket change to Jake. He just gave him 4 extra bags of gold. And after this happens, this shows that Jake has a solid grasp on the agents of coercion, and the agent of the market here is law enforcement because it's tasked with enforcing these rules. So buying them off is just a way of empowering the bourgeoisie. And so we're going to look at this section here, establish the market regulations. Jake figures out the prices of the market. He knows what the fines are. And he does the simple thing that most businesses do, which is you question, why should you obey the rules, no matter how innocuous they are, if you benefit from breaking the rule more and just paying the fine? If you get more value, even if the value is just being happy, you're going to make that transaction. So you shouldn't have it available to you. And he enlists the agents of coercion, and they're designed in a way that makes the proletariat beholden to the bourgeoisie, and the oppressed are dependent on their oppressor. Because the bourgeoisie don't actually have power themselves. They have money, but the power comes from the agents of coercion and the consciousness of the proletariat. And I'll get to that consciousness later. But the ability to purchase your way out of individual rules is a flaw in the system. Anybody can and will exploit this if they have the opportunity and the money available to them. And without competitors, the idea of market power is skewed. Jake doesn't have any competing interests that are driving up the prices. He just has way more gold than anybody else, and he manipulates the market into a market society. This is what we don't want. This is the main flaw of capitalism. Things here are getting pretty upscale. I just want you to pay attention to this picture for a minute. I think I found it on the Adventure Time wiki page, and you see that the fountain is just maxed out with furniture, gold, and meat. In fact, I'm not even sure how the gold is piled up in such a way that it can go above the tree stump that's holding it. But pay attention right here to how Finn is lying down on the furniture, but Jake is up here at the base of the tree, sitting on top of all of his gold. It's like he's kind of meditating with the gold, but it's also like he's a guard dog. And we can see that this gold right here elevates him a lot higher than the furniture elevates Finn. So, the problem here isn't the furniture, all of this furniture and all this meat that they can buy. It's all of the gold that they have and what they're able to do with it. Things start to get pretty bad. You see the Barry couple saying, "Okay, man," because it's going to get bad for them in a little bit. What do you do when you've bought everything around, but you still have money? Whatever you want, man, you got money. After this time lapse, Finn notes that there are no more goods in the city to purchase. They've purchased all of the furniture and meat. So Jake's kind of bored and he asks a passerby what his profession is. He's a dancer, so Jake gives him gold to dance. This isn't really a bad thing. The dancer is a dancer by trade, and he's getting paid to do what he enjoys. We'll see how this can kind of become skewed later. But one of Marx's main points was about the alienation that occurs through the division of labor. people become so specialized at certain tasks that they just can't enjoy what they're doing. And so you don't actually look at how what you're doing affects the overall system. And Marx believed heavily in the concept of homo labor, which is man the maker. That our natural state is not to some like aloof disposition, that we actually enjoy doing work, and even if we're presented the opportunity to not do it, eventually we're going to get back to doing something. So the guard runs out. Many things in this city are illegal, and Jake shoves gold in his chest, just, faster than the guard can actually come out. And so the guard leaves as quickly as he comes. This is basically the same thing as when you walk up to a gas station counter and you're purchasing some M&Ms or soda or whatever. And Jake realizes that he can use his massive amounts of money to manipulate the day-to-day events that occur in the town. He can manipulate individuals along with the agents of the market. He even turns the middle-class kids into bodyguards for his treasure, despite them saying, we pretty much don't need the money. And he puts 2 and 2 together when he says, this is crazy. People will do anything for money, and I've got a ton of it. The city functions fine when they purchase from the market. That's the way that the market is set up to work. The problem is when you use your commodity to circumvent rules that other individuals must obey. They're making a market society for themselves. Jake goes further down the rabbit hole. This is actually one of my favorite scenes from this, even if it is quite perverted, even in a sort of innocent but not innocent way. So the very couple in this house awaken to our protagonists, who have broken in. They think that they're going to be robbed, but Jake and Finn are here to give them money, not take it. Jake says he'll pay them to do things, such as switch the sides of the bed on which they sleep, and alter the way they lay in the bed. The couple get angry and protest. They're becoming alienated from doing the things that they enjoy, and even if you're getting paid to do it, doing something that you don't like creates a sort of alienation from your work and even from yourself. So while they're complaining, Jake threatens to withdraw the money they already promised the couple. The couple still wants the gold, so Jake says they can have as much gold as they can eat. The desire for money is so powerful that they actually try to eat the money, both when Jake gives it to them on the plates and when Finn hands them bags of gold as a sort of restitution for the suffering that they've been caused. Like I said, that's a focal point of Marx, is the dehumanizing aspect. So it's not necessarily that whatever job you're doing is dehumanizing. You're forced to do things that you really wouldn't do otherwise. And when Finn confronts Jake, Jake uses a form of manipulation on Finn. This manipulation is the ideology of capitalism. It is the consciousness of the proletariat. And you use the consciousness of the proletariat to control them and make them do things that are against their self-interest. So Jake says they're not doing anything they don't want. It's mutual. Free market. This is probably one of my favorite quotes from Jake. And he uses it to make Finn just stop doing what he's doing. Jake doesn't want to be stopped, so he has to justify his actions. And Jake, this point here, Jake taps into the consciousness of the proletariat. I wanted that to be in front of anybody who needed it. What do you do when somebody wants something that dehumanizes them? Even if this couple wants to eat gold, it's clearly not good for them. And In this system, you might have freedom from being a serf. However, if you don't have economic and, for example, healthcare freedoms, then you're not in control of yourself. The system is. So we need to distinguish between positive and negative freedoms. You want access to doing things. You don't just want access from having things happen. And this can also be a critique of colonialism, because companies would outsource their labor to barbaric conditions. You know, even the CEO of Nike doesn't want to know what's happening in his Pacific factories. And this lets them ignore the consequences of their actions. And it's under the guise of individual freedom. But what happens when your individual freedom conflicts with somebody else's? And now we gotta get rid of the money for real this time. This scene is also very important, even though it's easy to pass over. So Finn decides the only way to fix Jake is to get rid of all his money. He tells the middle class kids to take him to the poorest part of town, you know, and you wouldn't, the way the market has been displayed to us, you wouldn't think that there's a poor part of town. I mean, just look at that furniture in the last slide. So they gentrify the downtown area in order to increase economic activity. You don't want poor people in a market because they can't buy anything. So Finn tries to give them money. He tries to give money to the people of Crudberry Alley. But they're too blinded by their desire of gold to realize that Finn is trying to help them. He's actually very altruistic, both as an individual and in this situation. And this is an example of the need for access to economic and educational rights in order to really have a sort of autonomy over yourself. These dudes are too dumb to even take free money. I mean, you know, that's horrible. But they're free to live on the streets. So this is why you have to distinguish between positive and negative freedoms. Positive freedoms are things like education, economic safety nets, things like that that help you out. Negative freedom is just saying that you won't let something happen to you, like I won't let you be homeless, but you don't have any guarantees built into that. And we get down to the money scene. For one last hurrah, Jake wants to pay off the guards and the princess to let him sit on her head. As they approach the castle, the guard runs up to initially stop Jake, and then they're just bought off. This is emphasizing, this is literally just a market transaction. This is the same thing as when you go to the grocery store. The price is built into the system at this point. Jake is just shoving gold into these dudes' chest as quickly as they can walk up. So the queen becomes offended by the way Jake's acting, and she has the guards seize all of his money. This can happen because they're in a monarchy, which is one of the very interesting points. We haven't gotten to see many monarchies interact with capitalism. And eventually, you know, the way that Marx's ideology is set up, capitalism is kind of an inevitability. So you have to wonder, can monarchies coexist? The reason that Jake is able to be toppled by somebody who, by somebody from within the system, is because even though his money equals power, the princess's power also equals power. And the fallout, Finn and Jake are slated for execution. And you know, the princess is riling up the citizens in this scene with an inflammatory speech. Pay attention to the guard behind her. He is actually adorned in all of his bribes. He's taking off just numerous payoffs, but he's mimicking Wildberry Princess's outraged gestures. So she makes sure to point out that they're being dipped in gold for abusing their power. This is amplified by the guard wearing all of his bribes behind her, and it shows that the problem is not isolated to Jake's abuse of money. If you get rid of Jake, the guard is now the richest man in the kingdom. So is Jake really the problem here? No, he's just an individual. An individual who's obviously been corrupted by the system and what the system offers to him. So this is the conclusion. Before they're dipped in gold, Finn and Jake are rescued by Bemo's Robin Hood figure, and it shows that he's saving people who are less fortunate. They're really just victims of the system. And the vat of molten gold is redirected onto the corrupt guard. That is an allusion to Game of Thrones. And if you recognize that, good job. So this guard, like I said, he would be the most dangerous individual in the kingdom. He would have access to both the agents of coercion and the consciousness of the proletariat. So he could feasibly be more powerful than the princess. He'd basically be a king. And the ending of the show, I was a little bit confused about it. The only conclusion that I can really tie up into the piece of gold falling in between the crack in the treehouse is that it shows it's not the content of the individual's character. It's your relation, it's the totality of your social relations. So, there still are heroes at the end of this story, even though Jake has done a few questionable things. And if you guys have any questions about anything, just comment on this video. If you have any suggestions on literary theory or episodes that I should check out, please message me also. And the next one that I want to do is the Hall of Egress, but there's a lot packed into that with identity, so I might shelf that for a little bit later. But thanks for taking the time to listen. I'll try to make the next one shorter. Thanks guys, you've been great.